Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into the world of lost things, specifically ancient artworks that once dazzled empires and now are nowhere to be found. Picture this. You stand in the middle of a collapsed Roman villa, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, the walls around you nothing but jagged stone and mystery. A fresco that once glowed with color is gone, maybe crumbled into dust, maybe hidden in some collector's secret vault. The floor creaks ominously, and you wonder if you'll fall straight through. You probably won't survive this, at least not without a few scrapes on your toga.so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all listen from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander deeper into the ruined villa, your lantern flickering against walls that once bore grand frescoes of backchic revels or pastoral peace. These paintings weren't just decoration, they were statements of wealth, philosophy, even propaganda. The Romans loved to show off. But now, there's only a scab of pigment here, a ghostly line there. It's like trying to read an entire epic poem from a single surviving letter. You run your fingers over a cracked surface and feel grit crumble away. Somewhere, someone might have pried these walls apart centuries ago. Wealthy collectors in the Renaissance were notorious for stealing bits of Roman art like they were picking wildflowers. Historians still argue whether these removals saved the art from decay or doomed it to be lost forever in private vaults. Your foot hits something, an old trowel, perhaps left by an archaeologist who gave up hope. You shake your head, muttering that they could have at least cleaned up. It's easy to romanticize the past, but it's mostly just messy. You hear a drip of water and imagine all the lost colors washing away over time. Pliny the Elder once wrote about the mastery of Roman painters, praising their use of shading, realism, and even early perspective tricks. That's your mainstream history fact for the evening. Proof these lost frescoes weren't primitive doodles, but skilled masterpieces. But here's a quirkier tidbit. Romans sometimes added weird organic materials to their pigments, like ground-up mouse bones or even wine dregs to get richer shades. Think about that next time you sit Merlot in a gallery. You move to another wall. This one has been dug into. Someone clearly tried to liberate a section. Maybe it's in some aristocrat's manor in Europe right now, labeled tastefully as Anonymous Roman, 1st century C. Or maybe it broke in transit, lost in the mud of a medieval battlefield, an irony that'd make even Seneca roll his eyes. You try to imagine what the room would have looked like in full color. Romans loved vivid reds, sometimes using the famously toxic cinnabar pigment. So in a way, these lost frescoes might have killed a few painters for their art. You can almost hear them coughing behind you, which is a nice touch for the bedtime vibe, right? Don't worry, I'm sure your room is poison-free. You step back to look at the wider floor plan, trying to make sense of rooms with no stories left on their walls. The dining room, the bedrooms, the baths, all once lavishly decorated to impress guests, intimidate rivals, and display cultural literacy. You have to squint at the scratchy shadows of these ambitions. A bat flutters overhead, startled by your lamp. It's the villa's current curator, unpaid but diligent. You give it a nod of respect. After all, someone has to guard these ghost paintings. Some of the most famous missing Roman frescoes were lost in natural disasters, like the 62C earthquake that hit Pompeii before Vesuvius finished the job in 79. Whole walls collapsed, swallowing art forever into the earth. Excavators still find shards that hint at scenes we'll never see complete, but there's always the nagging idea that someone might have rescued them first. Smugglers, looters, collectors, your journey tonight is haunted not just by natural loss, but human greed. You stumble on a hollow-sounding section of wall. You knock gently. Maybe there's a hidden cavity, a cupboard of stolen art waiting centuries to be found. You lean in, listening. Nothing but your own breathing. There's something intimate about this loss. It's not just pigment on plaster. It's entire conversations, ideas, jokes, prayers, declarations of love. The ancients wanted to be remembered, to impress us across time. Instead, they're remembered in catalog numbers of missing art lists. You sigh. The room feels smaller now, pressing in with all the things you can't see. Somewhere out there, a fresco might still be intact in an abandoned cellar, propped against old wine casks, waiting for the right pair of eyes. Or maybe it was ground to powder to make new plaster centuries ago. That's the humbling part of history. Even beauty gets recycled. You run your hand along one last patch of color, imagining the artist squinting in dim lamplight, cursing at dripping paint, trying to get the curve of a nymph's shoulder just right. And you realize, even if the art is gone, the ambition, the human need to create, it lingers like a stubborn stain no one can wash away. You snuff your lamp. The room fades to black, and you listen to the quiet, heavy with lost stories. You emerge from the collapsed villa, shaking dust from your tunic, and squint into the sun-baked desert beyond. Now you're in Egypt, where the air feels dry enough to steal the moisture from your breath. The landscape stretches in silent waves of sand, the color of old parchment. Somewhere beneath these dunes lie paintings no one's seen for millennia. You feel like an uninvited guest at a royal funeral, tiptoeing around secrets the pharaohs meant to keep. You kick at the sand with your boot and imagine entire burial chambers caved in, their walls decorated with scenes of afterlife journeys. Not those well-preserved ones in tourist-crowded tombs, but lost ones, collapsed, or still buried under mountains of shifting dunes. The ancients believed these images literally helped the dead travel to the next world. Now they're as silent as the desert wind. Mainstream fact time. The Egyptians were masterful at painting on plaster, using natural mineral pigments that stayed vibrant for thousands of years. When they weren't destroyed by looters or flood damage from the unpredictable Nile, you shade your eyes and see a line of caravans in the distance. They remind you of the 19th century antiquities dealers who basically treated Egypt like a Walmart for relics. Historians still argue whether they preserved priceless art or simply looted entire cultures. Spoiler, probably a bit of both. You run your fingers through the sand and unearth a tiny chip of painted plaster, red ochre maybe. You squint at it like you're on an archaeological cooking show. Today, we're making Pharaoh's favorite wall art requires only one collapsed tomb and a strong back. But this is serious business. Many ancient Egyptian paintings disappeared not through dramatic theft, but neglect. Nile floods could soak tomb entrances, softening walls until they sloughed off like wet cake. Or they were simply lost under layers of debris as dynasties crumbled. No one thought to mark them on a map. You duck into a narrow tomb entrance someone left half excavated, half forgotten. The walls are smooth, but bare, stripped, maybe by tomb robbers who prized the art as much as the gold. In the 1800s, dealers in Cairo's markets sold painted coffin panels sawn from mummies like they were novelty posters. One French collector allegedly wallpapered his house with them, which is both deeply disturbing and undeniably on brand for that era. You laugh quietly, but there's an edge in it. The modern museum goer sees neat labels and spotlights. You see messy human motives, greed, obsession, curiosity, even a twisted sense of saving what would otherwise be lost. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some tomb painters added little jokes or even insults in the margins of scenes, like ancient graffiti hidden in royal tombs. Imagine being cursed forever for drawing a rude doodle in the afterlife's official art gallery. You feel the air grow colder as you shuffle farther in. Your lamp illuminates only blankness, where priests once recited spells over newly painted walls. The quiet is suffocating. You brush away some dust, hoping for a hidden figure or glyph. Nothing. It's like the past decided to play coy. Or maybe the sands simply won the war of attrition. Still, you remember that even the missing art shapes our understanding. Archaeologists often find fragments so small you need a microscope to see them, yet they're enough to guess at entire scenes. A god handing life to a pharaoh, a farmer leading cattle, a banquet frozen in time. You lean against a carved doorframe. It feels wrong to be here without the paintings. It's like walking into a play with no actors. You get why ancient Egyptians were so determined to keep tombs sealed. They weren't just protecting treasure, but the stories themselves. Your voice echoes in the narrow chamber. Nice place you had here. Shame about the missing decor. The silence answers back. You make your way out, blinking at the fierce sun. The desert doesn't care about your quest. It's happy to keep its secrets buried. You hike to another ruin, smaller and half swallowed by sand dunes that shift like slow waves. You have to admit it's kind of relaxing if you forget about the lost heritage. Here's something scholars love to debate: whether certain tombs were intentionally hidden from history even by their builders. Secret burial spots meant to be forgotten entirely to avoid grave robbers. If that's true, the missing paintings weren't lost so much as perfectly fulfilling their purpose. You stop for water and notice a local guide's donkey watching you with suspiciously human judgment. You tell it you're not here to steal anything. The donkey doesn't look convinced. You hear the wind blowing, picking up sand in little devils that swirl and dance. It's the perfect cover for a disappearance. One strong storm and entire entrances vanish for centuries. Even with satellite imaging, archaeologists sometimes miss tombs right under their feet. It's humbling. You think about all the colors, all the detail, the subtle shading that made papyrus flowers look soft, the tiny lines defining Ra's falcon eye, now erased or buried, leaving scholars arguing over half-finished maps and travelers' diaries. You take one last look around, feeling like an intruder in someone else's eternity. You kick the sand back over the plaster chip you found. Let it stay hidden a while longer. After all, not everything needs to be dragged into the light. As you turn away, the sun drops lower, casting the dunes in long shadows. It's a beautiful, brutal place to lose art forever. You brush off your hands and sigh. Onward, you mutter. The desert doesn't answer. You leave the desert behind, brushing the last grains of stubborn sand from your sleeves, and find yourself standing on a cold, tiled floor. But it's not just any floor. You look down at a glorious swirl of tesserae, tiny stones arranged with obsessive precision to make a shimmering image of Dionysus raising his cup, a lion at his feet. Except, this one's still here, in situ, like a lucky survivor. The real mystery is all the ones that aren't. You take a careful step, imagining you're in some wealthy Greek seaside villa. Wind off the Aegean would have cooled the mosaic while guests reclined on couches, praising Homer and complaining about taxes. But where is that art now? Well, a lot of it isn't here. It's in private collections on the other side of the world, hacked from floors by greedy hands. You close your eyes and see the same scene, only with workers prying it up with chisels, rolling it like a rug, shipping it off to Europe or America. Your mainstream fact for tonight. Greek mosaics were often made with colored stones or glass tesserae, so fine they rivaled painting in realism. Scenes of gods, heroes, animals, even 3D optical illusions were common, turning floors into grand storytelling devices. You squint at the design beneath you. A chunk is missing. Someone took it years ago. Maybe it's in a billionaire's foyer. Historians still argue whether these private sales protected mosaics from total destruction or simply erased their cultural meaning. After all, a floor isn't just decoration. It's part of a room, a house, a social ritual. You sit carefully on a nearby stone ledge. Imagine being the guest who gets invited over, only to find your host bragging, yes, that's from a Greek villa, ripped it up myself. That's some big home energy. You pick up a tiny fallen tessera, a glittering cube of blue. It feels smooth, heavy with history. For a second, you think about pocketing it. Then you remember that whole cursed object trope and decide against it. Quirky tidbit time. Ancient mosaic artists sometimes sign their work, like Kilroy graffitiing, I was here, but fancier. A few signatures survive, though many disappeared along with the stolen floors. You stand and wander deeper into the ruins. The ground is rough where mosaics used to be. Maybe they were stripped in the 19th century, or even earlier, some Roman general deciding he'd like a Greek floor for his Italian villa. The ancient world was full of art thieves. You see a faded diagram tacked up by some archaeologist, outlines of a design that's now missing. Dolphins leaping, ivy curling, lovers meeting under an arbor. You trace it with your finger and feel a pang of loss. Suddenly you're in a modern auction room in your mind. People raise paddles while a well-lit fragment of mosaic sits on a pedestal. Sold for 6 figures. You cough politely. I think you forgot the rest of the villa. You walk back into the light and feel the breeze, surprisingly cool. It brings the scent of time and the distant sea. For a moment you hear voices, maybe your imagination, maybe the past sneaking up. Wealthy Greeks arguing over color palettes, artists cursing late payments, children being told not to run across the wet cement. Then it's gone. Just wind and broken walls. Here's something you can't stop wondering. How many lost mosaics are buried under new construction? Entire towns built right on top of them. A modern highway might pave over Achilles slaying Hector in perfect stone detail. Historians debate whether digging them up is worth destroying today's buildings. It's a messy trade-off. You kick a loose stone and almost trip. Classic. That's your third slapstick moment tonight. Keeps you humble. You pause at a half-buried corner where they found some tesserae years ago, but ran out of funding to continue. It's like someone pressed pause on the past. You want to dig with your bare hands, but no, you shouldn't. Some of the most scandalous sales happened quite recently, yes, even in the 20th century. Looters in the Mediterranean learned to cut mosaics into panels for easy shipping. Imagine sawing the Mona Lisa into puzzle pieces and selling them separately. You feel a chill even though the sun is warm. It's the realization that loss isn't always natural. It can be deliberate, profitable. A careful erasure sold as preservation. You brush the dust from your hands. Maybe somewhere there's a dusty mansion, curtains drawn, housing a floor that once hosted philosophers and poets. And the owner? Sipping brandy, telling their guests, it's authentic. You snort. Authentic crime, maybe. A gull screeches overhead. You look up. The Aegean sparkles in the distance. At least it's still there, unchanged, even if the art isn't. You take a last look at the cracked foundation where a mosaic once lay whole and bright. Then you walk away slowly, listening to your footsteps crunch on history. You promise yourself you'll remember the missing parts, even if you never find them. You trudge away from the windswept ruins, imagining the sound of your own steps echoing in empty forums. Now you're skulking through the dim alleys of an ancient city at night. The lamp's light bounces off crumbling walls, catching the glint of something valuable. Welcome to the black market of antiquity, imperial theft rings that weren't exactly subtle about their artistic ambitions. You listen carefully. There's a hush, but it's not quiet. It's the murmuring of deals, of hush money, of conspirators comparing stolen goods. You pause at the edge of a shadowy courtyard, imagining a Roman official leaning in, hissing to his partner, "No one will miss this statue." Or that fresco. Or that temple frieze. Here's your mainstream fact. Rome's empire wasn't just built on military might, but also cultural appropriation. Victorious generals paraded looted art through the streets, sculptures, paintings, tapestries, turning public celebrations into the world's fanciest yard sale. You tap the wall with your knuckles. Solid, but old. Who knows what deals happened here? Some historians still argue whether this imperial theft actually preserved art that would have decayed in neglected temples, or just made sure it was stripped from its meaning forever. You slip inside a ruinous storeroom. Empty now, but in your mind you see it crammed with crates of purloined beauty. Imagine a shipping manifest. 1 bronze Athena, 2 marble Dionysi, 3 dozen amphorae filled with questionable wine. Your foot hits a crate. You cough dramatically. Yes, the genuine stolen article. Quirky tidbit time. Certain Roman governors actually filed expense reports for their art theft. Official requisition for civic improvement, they called it. Because nothing says civilization like politely itemized looting. You follow a narrow hallway, the walls dark with soot from ancient torches. You imagine a pair of thieves leaning against it, counting out denarii. The black market wasn't limited to shady back alleys, either. Entire networks connected artists, merchants, soldiers, and aristocrats willing to buy liberated masterpieces. You lean closer to the wall, noticing faint graffiti. Could it be directions? Left to stolen statues, right to honest trade? You chuckle. Even the past had its Yelp reviews. It wasn't just Rome, of course. The Greeks had their share of temple raiders, and later empires learned the art of, well, stealing art. But Rome industrialized it. One emperor might sack Corinth and ship home hundreds of treasures. Another might import entire temples stone by stone. You feel the ground dip, and you slip a bit, catching yourself. That's slapstick moment number 4. Historical tours should come with liability waivers. You wipe your hands on your tunic. The dust is thick here. You swear you can smell moldy parchment and oil lamps. It's not hard to picture the men cataloging stolen works, arguing over price. One man says, "This piece is priceless." The other says, "That's why you'll pay double." You remember reading about Verres, the Roman governor notorious for plundering Sicily. Cicero prosecuted him, famously listing the stolen works in detail like a shopping list of shame. Historians love this case because it's a rare look at art theft that actually got called out in court. You grin and mock whisper, "Don't get caught, kids." You lean against a column and listen to the wind whistling through gaps. Maybe it's the ghosts of all those artworks complaining about their treatment. You want to tell them you're sorry on behalf of humanity. Somewhere in the dark, you see the outline of a broken pedestal. No statue remains. Maybe it's in the Vatican museums now, cleaned up and labeled. Maybe it's in a Swiss vault. Or maybe it was melted for lime in the Middle Ages, its beauty reduced to construction mortar. You run your finger through the dirt and trace a little figure, a tiny stolen sculpture in the palm of your hand. You flick it away. Even imagining theft leaves a bad taste. Here's the thing. These theft rings didn't just work for emperors. Private collectors commissioned raids, promising fat rewards for newly discovered art. Even temples would sell off extra pieces quietly when funds got tight. Yes, the sacred hustle was real. You wander deeper, the air growing chillier. Some old storage rooms here were once packed with art so tightly you couldn't turn around without knocking over a Venus or two. But it's not all blame. Some Romans loved Greek art so much they learned from it. They copied it obsessively. Statues we call Roman are sometimes all that's left of lost Greek masterpieces. Imagine the irony, stolen copies that become the only surviving record of the originals. You pause and listen again. It's quiet. Too quiet. You clear your throat dramatically. Okay, who's buying tonight? Nothing answers. You step carefully over the cracked floor and leave the room behind. Outside, the moonlight reveals the outlines of old streets where art-laden wagons once rattled, guarded by mercenaries who might kill for a vase. You exhale. The air feels freer here. But you know the truth. Much of what we admire in museums today was bought, sold, stolen, resold. Not all art vanished into the earth. Some simply vanished into ledgers and vaults, its story rewritten with a receipt. You shake your head and walk on, promising yourself you'll keep telling these stories, even if the art is gone. You keep walking, leaving the hushed conspiracies of those theft rings behind, and now you're climbing a narrow, worn staircase. The stone is cold under your feet, and the air smells of centuries-old incense and candle smoke. You're somewhere in Byzantium, or what's left of it. You run your fingers along cracked walls that once held shimmering icons, panels painted with holy figures meant to guard and bless. Except now they're gone. You push open a heavy wooden door and step into a dark chamber. Moonlight slips through a broken stained glass window. It spills across the walls, highlighting empty hooks and outlines where sacred icons once hung. Mainstream fact for tonight: Byzantine icons weren't just art, they were devotional objects, believed to hold real spiritual power. These were painted with egg tempera on wood, often with gold leaf that glittered like divine fire. You exhale slowly. The cold seems to seep through your bones. Imagine monks painting these in silence, every brushstroke a prayer. Now they're missing. Looted, burned, hidden away. You walk past an old lectern, its wood gnawed by time. Historians still argue whether the worst icon losses came from foreign invaders, like Crusaders looting Constantinople in 1204, or from Byzantine iconoclasts themselves during internal religious conflicts. Both did their part in wiping entire traditions from the walls. You run your hand over a clean rectangle on the wall, the ghost of an icon. You whisper, "I'm sorry," which feels silly until you realize you mean it. Quirky tidbit time. Some icons were believed to be akairopoietos, meaning not made by human hands. These were said to be divinely created or miraculously imprinted images. Naturally, these miraculous icons were some of the most fought over and lost objects in all of history. You step carefully. The floor creaks. You imagine the day the Crusaders burst in, their armor clanging, torchlight throwing grotesque shadows, yanking icons off the walls and stuffing them into sacks. They didn't just want gold and jewels, they wanted these images. A spiritual trophy if you're being generous. A cultural hostage if you're being honest. You pause in the middle of the room and close your eyes. In your mind you see the icons restored, Christ Pantocrator gazing sternly from above, saints lining the walls, Mary with her deep, searching eyes. Then you open them and they're gone again. You notice a fragment in the corner, a sliver of painted wood, flaking gold. Maybe part of an icon no one managed to steal or burn. You pick it up gently and imagine the artist who laid the gold leaf so carefully. You smirk. Wouldn't go for much on the black market now, huh? Then you feel bad about the joke. But you keep it in, because you're human. You wander out into another corridor lined with niches. Some are empty. Others have fragments of inscriptions in ancient Greek. You squint at them, sounding them out like a second grader. God bless this house, or maybe God help these thieves. Outside, you see the skyline of a ruined city. The dome of a church with no roof. Bells long gone. The bones of an empire that prided itself on being the new Rome, the bastion of Christianity. You imagine Venetian merchants overseeing the packing of crates. Be careful with that virgin and child. We have a buyer in Florence. You shake your head. They didn't even pretend it was rescue. They wanted to own holiness itself. You walk along a crumbling wall, noticing where frescoes once adorned it. Icons weren't the only casualties. Some walls still have color clinging to them like a desperate prayer. But mostly, it's all been stripped, shipped, lost. You lean back, looking up at the stars appearing overhead. Cold and distant. You remember that some icons were hidden by monks who refused to see them destroyed. Buried in crypts, walled into secret compartments, smuggled to friendly monasteries in the mountains. Historians debate how many of those caches were later forgotten completely. Somewhere in Anatolia or Greece, there could be entire collections still walled away, waiting. Or crumbled into unrecognizable dust. You chuckle drilly. Maybe we should rent a metal detector. You turn and notice an old candle stand. You imagine monks praying here, shadows flickering, chanting in Greek. You whisper a snippet you remember, Kyrie eleison. Lord, have mercy. The echo sounds lonely in the dark. You walk slowly back to the doorway. This place feels like a mausoleum for art. A resting place for holy images that might never return. But even as you leave, you catch a hint of stubbornness in the air. The idea that some icon painter's prayer might still hang here, unseen but felt. The quiet insistence that loss isn't the same as oblivion. You step outside and take one last look at the ruined church, now just walls and stars, and you promise yourself you'll remember it, even if it doesn't remember you. You step away from the crumbling Byzantine walls, brushing off flakes of ancient plaster, and find yourself at a windy harbor. The smell hits you immediately, salt, brine, and old ropes soaked in centuries of sea spray. You stand on the splintered deck of a merchant vessel that's somehow still afloat in your imagination. But the real ones? Most sink. And they took a lot of art with them. You grip the railing as the ship rocks, creaking like a stubborn old man complaining about the waves. Beneath you, the sea is dark, unknowable. It's the world's biggest vault of lost art. Mainstream fact time. Ancient merchant ships carried not just grain and wine, but precious cargo, statues, paintings, decorated pottery. Some of the finest Greek vases ever found came from shipwrecks, preserved in eerie underwater silence. You lean out, peering over the edge. Somewhere below lie paintings rolled in waterproof containers. Well, they tried, mosaics stacked like fragile cakes and fresco fragments bundled for rich clients. If the sea cooperated. Spoiler, it rarely did. You imagine the panic as a storm hit. Sailors yelling, water pouring in, priceless art tumbling into the dark. Historians still argue whether much of this trade was legal, semi-legal, or straight-up smuggling. Lines blurred when money talked. You wander down the creaking deck toward the captain's quarters. The door hangs off its hinges. Inside, you see a ruined ledger, imaginary but vivid. One marble Aphrodite. 2 crates of fresco fragments. Payment pending. You smirk. They should have gotten insurance. Then you realize they probably did. Ancient marine insurance existed. But they couldn't replace unique art. You hear the groan of the hull. The sea wants everything back eventually. Quirky tidbit. Ancient ships often packed art among more practical goods to cushion it. Your priceless statue might have had a second job as an expensive shock absorber between olive oil amphorae. You step carefully. A loose board cracks under you, slapstick moment number 5, and you flail, catching yourself just before hitting the deck. You mumble, graceful as always, and move on. You stop at the prow, feeling the wind slap your face. You imagine the Mediterranean as it was, busy, bustling, dangerous. Pirates, storms, reefs. One wrong turn and your cargo of irreplaceable art became fish habitat. Divers today sometimes find these wrecks. Encrusted amphorae. Bronze statues with barnacles for crowns. Once in a while, they find painted panels sealed in time. Enough to know how much was lost. You close your eyes and picture a diver's flashlight sweeping over the seabed. A tangle of pottery shards. A shattered marble hand reaching up from the silt. The haunting part? That's all they see. The rest of the sculpture might be buried meters deeper or scattered across the seafloor by currents. Historians debate how many masterpieces are effectively unrecoverable, too deep or too fragile to raise. The sea guards its secrets jealously. You open your eyes and see the port in the distance. Ancient warehouses once brimmed with imported art waiting to be sold. But the sea took its cut, a maritime tax paid in beauty. You hop off the deck and onto the dock. It's cracked and old. Weeds grow in the gaps. You hear gulls screaming overhead, sounding like they're laughing at human folly. You wander into an abandoned warehouse. Dust motes swirl in the light. You imagine workers cataloging new arrivals. Bust of Zeus. Fresco panel. Mural fragment. You trace a finger along a table, leaving a line in the dust. How many of those never arrived? How many ships went down just off the coast, so close yet lost? Divers sometimes find them in surprisingly shallow waters, the art half ruined, but still recognizable. A Persephone here. An Eros there. You sit on a crate, looking at the water through the broken doorway. It shimmers, innocent and treacherous all at once. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some sailors believe certain statues were cursed, bringing storms down on their ships. So they'd toss them overboard intentionally to appease angry gods. Makes you wonder if Poseidon has the world's best undersea art gallery. You chuckle softly, then sober up. You imagine a wealthy Roman patron awaiting his shipment that never came. Furious. Bereft. Ordering another. The cycle continued. You stand and dust off your clothes. You walk along the wharf, the boards creaking, the sea slapping against stone pilings. You think of all the unnamed artists whose work is down there unseen. The stories they wanted to tell. The colors they chose so carefully. All swallowed by the sea, you pause and look back one last time at the water. It moves constantly, never yielding its secrets for free. You whisper, keep them safe, though you're not sure from what. Then you turn away, leaving the harbor behind, your footsteps echoing across the empty dock, because even if the art is lost beneath the waves, the longing to see it, that survives. You leave the briny smell of the harbor behind, shaking sea salt from your hair, and now you're somewhere strangely quiet. A grand hall of polished marble, but eerily blank. No statues, no paintings, no mosaics, just empty plinths and spotless walls. You run your hand over the cold stone. It's pristine. Too pristine. Because sometimes, the greatest mystery of lost art isn't theft or disaster, but deliberate erasure. You clear your throat. It echoes too well. The hall feels like it's waiting for a ceremony that'll never come. Mainstream fact for tonight. Throughout history, rulers have ordered systematic destruction of artworks to enforce ideology. Think of Akhenaten in ancient Egypt smashing old gods' images, or Christian emperors closing pagan temples and defacing statues. State-sanctioned iconoclasm wiped countless masterpieces. You wander slowly down the hall, your steps muffled by ancient dust. It's unsettling, like walking through someone's mind after all their memories have been deleted. You stop at a pedestal, its top polished from countless offerings. Now it holds nothing. You imagine the lost statue, a goddess serene in marble, offerings of oil lamps flickering at her feet. Historians still argue whether these purges were cultural cleansing, religious fervor, or raw political intimidation. The truth is probably an unholy cocktail of all three. You let out a sigh. Nothing like burning art to show everyone how enlightened you are. Quirky tidbit time. In some late Roman edicts banning pagan imagery, there were odd loopholes, like you could keep statues if you chopped off the heads of the gods and swapped them for emperors. Talk about creative editing. You walk toward what used to be a shrine. The floor bears faint chisel marks where images were cut out of mosaic panels, the gaps now filled in with blank stone. You crouch to trace one, imagining the careful work of destruction. It wasn't random. It was thorough. You can almost hear the conversations. Remove this scene. Too pagan. Scrape that wall. Too subversive. You stand, brushing dust from your hands. You know the past was full of contradictions. The same emperor who commissioned glorious Christian mosaics also ordered priceless pagan art destroyed. Progress, but make it selective. You wander into a side chamber. Once a treasury for offerings, now empty. The air is dry and still, like it's holding its breath. You see faint lines on the walls, traces of fresco borders, decorative motifs that survived only as scars. You squint at them and joke. Nice minimalist renovation, but your voice sounds small. You walk along the walls, imagining the art, vivid scenes of processions, sacrifices, philosophical dialogues. All scraped away, not by time, but by decree. Somewhere a monk or bureaucrat probably filled out a form for this. Authorization to destroy mural, approved. You shake your head. Imagine explaining that to the artists. Hey, great work, beautiful colors, incredible realism, but the emperor changed his mind. You run your fingers over another scarred panel. In places, the plaster is smoother than silk, fresh from being scraped down centuries ago. Historians debate whether these orders were universally enforced. In some regions, local officials ignored them, saving treasures out of spite or indifference. In others, zealous followers smashed everything, leaving no trace. You pause at a door frame and notice a fragment of carving high up, overlooked. A cherubic face peers down, half destroyed but defiant. You salute it. Nice try hanging on. The irony is, so much of what we know about these lost artworks comes from descriptions written by their destroyers, like someone bragging about arson while describing the house in perfect detail. You wander into a wider room, and the air seems colder. You imagine processions of priests, senators, worshippers, all gone. The art they commissioned, erased on purpose. Quirky fact 2 for the night, bonus round. In medieval Europe, even when pagan statues survived, they often got converted. A Greek nymph might be renamed as a Christian saint. New nose, new label, new job, you shake your head. Identity crisis much? You pause, listening to the wind outside whistle through broken windows. It sounds like a long, exasperated sigh. You move on, boots crunching old debris. You wonder how many priceless artworks were simply burned for fuel during sieges, or ground into lime for construction. The past was thrifty and ruthless. You remember reading about entire libraries of painted scrolls, ordered destroyed for heresy or sedition. So many images lost not to accident, but policy. You imagine the flames licking at color, at ink, at memory itself. You pause, feeling the weight of that. Not everything lost was stolen. Some of it was given up willingly, in the name of order. You reach the far wall and stop. There's a single phrase scratched into the plaster, maybe centuries old. We remember. You smile. Good. Because even if the art is gone, the fact that someone tried to erase it means they feared its power. And you, standing here in the dust, are proof that memory doesn't die so easily. You take one last look around the blank hall. Then you turn and walk out slowly, your steps deliberate, promising to carry those lost images with you. You leave the silent, scraped clean hall behind and step into a cool forest. The air here is heavy with damp earth and the green hush of ancient trees. You walk a narrow trail that winds between mossy stones, some carved, some just rocks. But as you look closer, you realize many of these stones were once part of something greater. Temples, monuments, even grave markers, broken, scattered, repurposed. You pick up a chunk of marble and turn it over. On one side, the faint curve of a draped toga. On the other, a mason's new chisel mark from when it was reused in a farmhouse foundation. Mainstream fact for tonight. Throughout history, people have recycled older monuments to build new things. Ancient temples were quarried for cathedrals. Old statues were burned for lime. Art didn't vanish. It transformed, often without ceremony. You let the stone drop back onto the path with a soft thud. You walk on, noticing a fallen column half buried in moss. It's beautiful even in ruin. Its fluting worn down by centuries of rain. Historians still argue whether this reuse was necessity or disrespect. Some say people genuinely didn't see these ruins as worth preserving. Others think they deliberately erased old powers by making them serve new ones. You lean against the column, damp moss chilling your back. If these old gods were watching, they must have been furious. Quirky tidbit. In medieval Europe, villagers often stole carved stones from abandoned Roman sites for their own houses, believing they warded off evil. Imagine living in a nice cottage with a giant marble foot sticking out of your fireplace. You keep walking, the trail narrowing between roots that trip you. That's slapstick moment number 6, down you go, catching yourself on a vine. You mutter, very dignified, before moving on. You reach a clearing where stones are laid in a rough circle. A local legend claims druids built it. Reality? Likely bits of an old Roman bathhouse, reassembled by well-meaning antiquarians in the 1800s who played Lego with history. You circle it slowly. Each stone bears tool marks from multiple eras. Chisel lines cross older, smoother curves. You run your fingers over them, feeling the arguments between centuries. You pause to sit on one block, which probably once supported a temple roof. Now it's your personal bench. You feel the cold seep in and think about all the art that didn't survive this casual recycling. You imagine a medieval stonemason cursing at the weight while dragging a carved frieze off a ruined temple. This'll make a fine doorstep. You laugh softly, shaking your head. You can't really blame them. Stone was expensive. Art was just there. You get up and wander to the edge of the clearing. You see more ruins beyond, half-buried walls, toppled lintels, fragments of once grand statues turned into livestock troughs. Historians love to debate how much we lost this way. It wasn't dramatic theft or sudden catastrophe, but slow, practical erosion. People taking what they needed. You step carefully over roots and imagine how many centuries it took for entire temples to disappear one wheelbarrow at a time. You stop at another stone. It has a faint carving, maybe a vine motif. You trace it, imagining it bright with ancient paint. Then you see someone's initials scratched over it centuries later. Nice, you mutter sarcastically. You hear birdsong overhead, strangely serene given the cemetery of art beneath your feet. You keep moving, feeling the forest close in. It's beautiful here, but you realize it's also a graveyard for creativity. Not in the tragic sense of violent destruction, but the banal inevitability of reuse. You reach a stream and squat down to splash water on your face. It's cold, clear, and you watch it run over pebbles that might once have been part of a marble road. You listen to the gurgle and think about the people who did all this repurposing. Most weren't villains. They didn't hate the art, they just needed to build. To live. It's sobering. Sometimes history isn't lost to thieves or conquerors, but to regular people trying to roof their houses. You stand and watch the water for a moment longer. Then you follow the stream, letting it guide you past more ruins. Some stones are so worn they barely look carved at all. Others show crisp lines, hints of old mastery. A Corinthian capital used as a birdbath. A carved lion head supporting a barn beam. You stop and grin. Recycling before it was cool. But the grin fades. Because even if you can admire the ingenuity, you can't ignore what's missing. The context. The stories. The careful arrangement meant to awe, to inspire. You step back onto the trail, looking at the shadows growing longer. You promise yourself you won't forget these lost details. Even if they're hidden under moss, even if they hold up someone's porch, because art doesn't really vanish. It just changes shape. And it's up to you to see what it used to be. You head deeper into the forest, the sounds of water and wind filling your ears, carrying the lost whispers of artists who probably never thought their masterpieces would end up as bricks in someone else's wall. You leave the forest behind, brushing off damp leaves and bits of moss, and step into a vast, echoing space. This time it's not ancient ruins, it's a modern museum gallery. The marble floors shine under clinical lighting, the walls are freshly painted, and the air is heavily conditioned. But look closer. Half the pedestals are empty. Labels hang like mournful epitaphs, fragment missing, provenance unknown, stolen, presumed lost. You walk slowly down the hallway, your shoes squeaking just enough to remind you you're here alone. Mainstream fact. Major museums around the world house thousands of ancient artworks that were lost to their homelands through colonial-era extraction. Whether bought, acquired, or gifted, many pieces simply left and never returned. You pause at one empty glass case. Its label describes a Greek marble head snatched from its temple in the 1800s, sold to a collector, then auctioned off in the 1980s, and now gone. Stolen. Never recovered. You tap the glass gently, as if knocking on a coffin. Historians still argue whether keeping these objects in big museums is cultural preservation or just a polite form of theft. Some call it a rescue. Others call it kidnapping. You wander on. The museum tries to fill the gaps with photos of the lost works. You squint at one, a glorious fresco fragment from Pompeii, bright as the day Vesuvius buried it. Except the real piece was stolen from storage in 1944 and vanished into a private collection. You snort. Storage. The eternal art limbo. Quirky tidbit time. Black market dealers have been caught selling fake, repatriated art, taking real stolen objects, forging papers to say they're being returned, and then flipping them for profit. A crime so meta it deserves an award. You lean against a pillar, listening to the hush of the museum. No kids running. No tour guides chatting. Just the gentle hum of AC and the ghostly sense of missing things. You wander into another room where the walls are lined with ancient fresco fragments. Some are real. Some are reproductions of lost originals. The museum is honest about it. You can almost hear the curator's exhausted apology. We did our best. You walk up to one wall-sized photo of a mural stolen from an Afghan Buddhist monastery in the 20th century. Smuggled piece by piece. Now no one knows where it is. You shake your head. If you're gonna steal Enlightenment art, at least read the moral lesson first. You wander on, past another case. Empty. The label explains, return to country of origin. A rare happy ending. You smile. Good for you, little statue. But next to it, another label. Status unknown after 1972 looting. You exhale. Historians love to debate how to solve this. Repatriation? Shared custody? Digital archives? But all the arguing doesn't change the fact that entire catalogs of art are simply gone. You sit on a bench in the middle of the room. It's so clean, so ordered, so haunted. You look up at the skylight, thinking about how many ancient artists never imagined their work would be cut up and sold off. The surviving pieces stuck in museum basements or private vaults. You stand and wander back to the main entrance. The gift shop is shuttered. No t-shirts tonight. You pause by the museum map on the wall. So many wings dedicated to civilizations that can't see their own art. Labels in multiple languages. A promise to share, yet half the objects missing. You walk slowly along the polished corridor, your reflection ghostly in the glass. You stop at a security barrier with a sign, "Gallery closed for renovation." You lean over the rope to peek in. Empty walls. Scaffolding. A ladder. Fresh white primer covering old cracks. You sigh. Maybe you'll look better next time. Maybe you'll get your pieces back. You turn away, your footsteps echoing in the vastness. You remember the old, desperate arguments that justify keeping stolen art. They can't take care of it themselves. But you know it's not that simple. Museums are better at preserving objects than respecting their meanings. You wander toward the exit, glancing back one last time at the empty cases and sad labels. You whisper, "We see you," even if they don't. And then you push the heavy door open and step back outside. The night air hits you. Cool, real, bracing. You look up at the stars and think about all the lost art out there, sitting in vaults, hiding in villas, crumbling in forgotten corners of the world. But even if it's lost, you think it's not gone from memory. Not as long as you're willing to look for it. You take a deep breath, let it out slowly, and start walking, because the story isn't over. You leave the museum behind you, those cold, polished floors and hushed apologies, and find yourself wandering through a city at dawn. The first light slides over rooftops, catching on glass towers and old domes alike. You stuff your hands in your pockets, feeling the chill seep into your bones, and look around at the modern world that somehow holds all this ancient loss in its foundations. You walk down a cracked sidewalk where weeds push through the seams, life refusing to be paved over. Mainstream fact. Even today, construction sites regularly uncover lost artworks, Roman mosaics under parking garages, Greek statues beneath new apartment blocks. Entire histories hidden until a bulldozer slices them in half. You shake your head. The city wakes up around you. Cars cough to life. Shops rattle open. A delivery truck beeps as it backs into an alley. Also ordinary, and beneath it, layers of missing beauty. Historians still argue whether it's better to leave those buried artworks untouched, safe, but hidden, or to dig them up and risk destroying them. Preservation versus discovery. You cross the street at a blinking light, muttering, "No easy answers." You duck into a side alley where graffiti sprawls across brick walls. And you have to admit, it's kind of gorgeous. Neon spray paint. Swirling shapes. A snarling tiger sharing space with bubble letter tags. You laugh softly. Guess people never stop making art on stolen walls. Quirky tidbit time. Archaeologists have found ancient Roman graffiti complaining about landlords, praising gladiators, or simply declaring, "I was here," the original tagging. Makes you wonder if 2,000 years from now someone will mourn the loss of this alley's masterpieces. You lean against the wall, feeling the grit against your back. It's different from the smooth museum cases, but somehow more honest. You step back onto the main street and keep walking. The city hums. Horns honk. Someone's music blares from a window. It's chaotic and alive, and all of it stands on top of lost layers. You stop at a construction site behind tall fencing. You peer through a gap and see an excavator idle for the night, its claw like some sleeping beast. The ground is torn open, and you swear you see marble glinting in the dirt. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it's part of a temple floor, about to be carted off as rubble. You sigh. You guys gonna check for antiquities before pouring concrete? You wander on, feeling the early sun warm your face. You realize so much art didn't just vanish to looters, or burn in war, or sink in shipwrecks. It got built over. Forgotten in the rush to make something new, you pause at a bus stop. An ad on the shelter shows a sleek condo tower rising where, 2 centuries ago, there was farmland, and before that, maybe a Roman villa with glorious mosaics now smashed to pebbles. You lean on the plexiglass, listening to the wind rush past. You smirk. Well, at least they'll have nice views. You push yourself upright and wander further into the waking city. You see a grand government building built in neoclassical style, pillars and all. You squint at it. You know half those pillars were inspired by plundered originals. You walk up the steps and run a hand along the cold stone. Smooth. Imposing. Designed to make you feel small. You mutter, "Nice aesthetic, shame about the moral bankruptcy." You step back down, shaking your head. The truth hits you hard. Every city is a palimpsest. Layers scraped away and overwritten. Some art stolen. Some lost. Some destroyed by time. Some forgotten on purpose, but you know the ghosts are still here. The empty spaces in museums. The blank walls where frescoes were scraped away. The seafloor littered with broken statues. The farmer's wall built from temple blocks. You exhale, watching your breath curl in the cold, because even if you can't see it, you know it, and that's the real act of remembrance. You keep walking, footsteps steady. Past shops opening for the day. Past street vendors setting up carts. Past murals fresh with spray paint. You stop at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. You whisper, "We remember you." Though you're not sure if you're talking to a Greek vase, a Roman mosaic, or a stolen Buddhist fresco, but it feels right. And as the light changes, you cross the street, disappearing into the crowd. Because the mystery of all that lost art isn't just where it went, it's whether anyone cares enough to keep looking. You slow your steps now, letting the city fade behind you. The streets grow quiet, the wind softer, the colors dimmer. Your breath slows. You find yourself somewhere gentle, a twilight space between worlds, where the lost art you've imagined all night hangs softly in the air, faded, yes, but not entirely gone. You see them in your mind's eye, the stolen statues standing proud again, the frescoes glowing on walls rebuilt from dust, the icons shining with holy gold under flickering candles. You let yourself picture it all whole, even if you know it isn't, because remembering is its own kind of preservation. You breathe slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You let go of the tension you didn't know you were carrying. Your shoulders relax. Your jaw unclenches. Your heartbeat slows to a quiet, steady rhythm. You listen to the hush. No footsteps. No traffic. Just the low, soothing hum of time itself. Somewhere out there, the sea still guards its treasures. Forests still hold broken columns in their roots. Museums still keep empty spaces waiting for returns that may never come. And beneath new towers, the old mosaics still sleep in the dark earth. But you're here. And you remember. You let that thought warm you, like a blanket pulled over your shoulders. Because in the end, nothing is truly lost if someone is willing to tell its story. And tonight, that someone was you. So rest easy now. Let your eyes close. Let the last scraps of lamplight soften and fade. You're safe. You're warm. You've carried the lost with you long enough for one night. Sleep well. Dream deep, and let the mysteries keep you company until morning.